Hello, today we will be learning how to write linear equations in slope-intercept form from graphs. So in the previous lesson we graphed equations, now we're actually going to go backwards and write them. Go ahead and add writing equations to your table of contents. You'll see I'm on page 73 and 74. Our objective today is to be able to write linear equations in slope-intercept form from graphs. And how do I write linear equations in slope-intercept form from graphs? Feel free to pause the video to write all that down. All right, so let's do a little review. Remember, slope-intercept form just means that the equation is written in y equals mx plus b form. M represents the slope, b represents the y-intercept. Again, if you need to write this down, feel free to pause the video. Okay, so when we are reversing, we have a graph and we need to write it in slope-intercept form. We're still doing the same thing. We need to find our slope and we need to find our y-intercept. So the slope, remember, is rise over run. So we just count the spaces. So in this case, my slope is 1 over, and then I see 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. So my slope becomes 1 over 4. The y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So we find the y-axis. And then we find where it crosses that. So it's right here. So that's at -1, 2, 3. And then we just write it in that form. So the form is y equals mx plus b. So we replace m and b with the slope and the y-intercept. So our equation becomes y equals, our slope is 1/4, x, and then it's a -3. So our equation becomes y equals 1/4 x minus 3. Notice that x and y remain. Remember, that just represents any coordinate on the graph. So we always leave the x and y. So let's look at another one. So I'm going to create that triangle to find my rise over run. So I'm going down 1, 2, 3. So I've got a -3 over 4. So my slope becomes -3 over 4. The y-intercept, I got to find where it crosses the y-axis. So I follow the y-axis until I find that point, which is right here. So that's at a +1. If you are someone who struggles with understanding the graph without all the numbers written there, it is totally okay to write them in. Okay? So if this is something you prefer, feel free to do that anytime. And we have -1. Okay? So now let's go ahead and write the equation. So we have y equals, I need my slope, which is -3/4 x, and then this time it's a +1, so it's going to be +1. Okay, let's try a couple more. All right, so first need to find my slope. You can choose any 2 points on the graph. Okay, so I see I'm going to go down 2, so that's a -2 and over 1. So this becomes -2 over 1 is my slope. That's the same thing as saying -2. The y-intercept, I need to follow the y-axis until I find that point. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to have y equals -2x plus 4. Okay, so this next one, I'm going to have my 2 points here. So my rise is 2, my run is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So my slope becomes 2 over 5. My y-intercept right here, so that's at 0. So this time my equation is y equals 2/5 x. We would say plus 0, but I don't need to write 0 at the end. So the way we write it when our y-intercept is 0 is just y equals 2/5 x. Okay, so taking a look at this line, my slope is 0. Okay, remember when we have that horizontal line, that's a 0 slope. My y-intercept is right here at 1, 2, 3. So if I were to set this equation up, I'd get y equals 0x plus 3, but 0 times anything is 0, so this really just becomes y equals 3. Okay, remember this is an undefined slope. So when we have an undefined slope, this is one of those ones that we need to star. It's always going to be x equals, and whatever the value of x is here that it lies on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is -5. This is just something you're going to have to remember. Okay, so let's look at some word problems here. Susie is planning her wedding for the reception. The venue charges a one-time rental fee plus an additional cost for each guest. Use the graph to write an equation in slope-intercept form to represent the amount spent, y, for x guests. So this is just telling us we have to find our slope. We can choose any 2 points. Now notice that we like to read this as 1 over 1. But when we have a problem with actual different numbers, we need to follow that. So we have to think, okay, this is 1,500. So 1,500 to 2,000 is a change of 500. So I'm rising 500. And then I'm changing 10 here. 10 to 20 is a change of 10. So you need to be careful when we're looking at word problems, and I'm not just counting by 1. And then we reduce this. So our slope, 500 divided by 10, is 50. Okay, now I still need to find the y-intercept. So that's where it crosses the y-axis. So this right here is our y-axis. So here, so our y-axis is 1,000. So my equation becomes y equals 50x plus 1,000. let's look at the next example. Josh opened a savings account. Every Friday, he made an additional deposit. Use the graph to write an equation to represent the amount saved. So again, this just tells me when it says to write an equation, I'm writing a slope-intercept equation. So I need to find my slope. So I'm going to do rise over run. I can't just say it's 2 over 1. It is 1 on the bottom, so this would be 1, but I got to count here. So it looks like we're counting by 20s, so this is really 180 to 220. So 2040, this is a change of 40. So this becomes 40 over 1. Reducing that, it's the same thing as 40. And then I need to find my y-intercept. This is right here, so that's at 100. So my equation becomes y equals 40x plus 100. Okay, it's important to understand what the equations mean. So it means that Josh already had $100 in his savings to begin with. And then each week he's adding $40. If we go back to Susie with our wedding planning, the initial cost is $1,000. And then every guest after that is $50. Okay, so that's what that means. Okay, what I'd like for you to do at this time is to try to write equations for these 5 graphs. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can write equations for these 5. All right, hopefully at this time you pause the video. Let's see how you did. Okay, your equation should be y equals 2/3 x plus 3. Number 2 should be y equals 4x minus 2. Number 3 should be y equals x plus 1. 4 should be 3/5 x. And number 5 should be y equals negative 3/2 x plus 1. If you had any questions on those, please make sure you get them answered. Okay. Let's take a look at a word problem. This one says, describe and correct the error in finding the slope and y-intercept of the I don't know why it says that. Should just be of the line. So y equals 4x minus 3. It says the slope is 4 and the y-intercept is 3. Can you figure out what the error is here? Hopefully what you recognize is that this is a negative 3 and Ralph said it was a positive 3. That is a common mistake, and that's why I want to clear that up. So really what it should say is the y-intercept is 3. Okay, so is negative 3. We really need to be careful about that. All right, at this time you are ready to move on. If you have any questions, please make sure you get those answered.